Welcome to Stop the Fight, episode 8. And we have a really big weekend of boxing. A lot to talk about. Let's go.
Don't brag about taking my side piece. Don't brag about taking my side piece, though.
I broke my back. Back is broken. Spinal.
He's strong, man. Good boy. Just.
All right, let's get right to it. No beating around the bush. The biggest fight this weekend is a fight between two men who are not boxers. Jake Paul is a YouTube guy. Ben Askren is an MMA guy with a wrestling background. Neither of these men are boxers. But they're fighting a boxing fight. Probably the biggest fight of the weekend. As a matter of fact, not probably, this is the biggest fight of the weekend, at least to a casual audience. This is the one that's going to be on Twitter. This is the one that's going to be on Instagram highlights. This is the one that people are going to be talking about. So, and as I've said previous times before, I like these fights. I don't have any problem with them. This is prize fighting. People get paid, they fight. Jake Paul, Ben Askren. Who do I like? Well, Ben Askren looked really clumsy with his hands in MMA and UFC. He's known for his spectacular knockout where he got knocked out in like the opening seconds of the fight against Masvidal with a flying knee. Now, his stand-up has always been his weakest point. It's very easy to look at Ben Askren and say, yeah, no way, I'm taking Jake Paul. He's obviously going to win, especially with the way he knocked out Robinson, whoever it was that he fought last on Triller. But you have to remember, it doesn't matter how good you looked against the basketball player who was a head shorter than you. It doesn't matter how good you look on these heavy bag and mitt videos that you're posting on YouTube. These are all doctored videos. You set up the right angles with the good lighting, and you show us all, oh, look at this, I can strike. You can't strike. I mean, you can't strike at a professional level. Jake Paul can't. He can't. He's getting better, no doubt. The longer you train something, you're going to get better at it. But even as bad as Ben Askren is with his stand-up, he's bad relative to professional fighters. This is a completely different ballgame, guys. Even if Ben Askren's stand-up sucks in the UFC, that's better than 99% of people who are not professional boxers. That's still that much better. I don't think most people understand just how much better the striking is in a professional context than on YouTube or a YouTuber's striking. This is going to be night and day, I have a feeling. And even if it's close, even if by some miracle Jake Paul is a super gifted athlete. I mean, we know the Paul brothers wrestled in high school, but even they're super gifted athletes and he learned how to strike, and in these 2 years he's become like a decent amateur level boxer. Here's where the big problem comes in. Ben Askren has fought professionally in MMA for years. And one of the most important things in a professional fight is the endurance. Until you're in the ring, you don't know how your stamina is going to hold up in a professional setting. Everything is fine in sparring, but until you have the lights on you, until you have an opponent in front of you who can actually hurt you, until all that is coming into play, until your energy is just seeping out of your legs as you're moving and are afraid and you have a little bit of that gazelle feet syndrome going on, until you experience that, you can't learn that lesson. And Ben Askren, for all his faults as a striker, has fought as a professional fighter. He's got 21 MMA fights. That's a lot. That's experience. His body knows how to handle a fight, regardless of whether he's a good striker or not. So I think Jake Paul has bit off a little too much this time around. This isn't a former basketball player. Not to make fun of basketball players, but they're known for being a little fickle. Ouch, my toe hurts. So Ben Askren is not going to be a basketball player. He's taking punches from legit fighters. You're not going to surprise him with your power. So I don't think that this is going to be a walk in the park. And I think the casinos probably have Ben Askren as a little bit undervalued. Currently, I'm looking at DraftKings. Ben Askren is a plus 150 underdog, and Jake Paul's a minus 200 favorite. That means you bet $100 on Ben Askren, you win 150. I think that's a pretty good bet. Ben Askren is a professional fighter. Sure, he's not a boxer, but he's a professional fighter. I really think that there is some money to be made here. 8 rounds, guys. 8 rounds. Jake Paul and his brother both looked a little tired at the end of their previous fights. And they went and, how long was Jake Paul, the other Paul brother's brother, fight? Like 6 rounds? He looked completely gassed after 6 rounds. He lost that fight. Jake Paul looked like he was gassing at round 2 in the Nate Robinson fight. So, I don't know. He hasn't gotten many rounds in. He had 1 round in his first fight, 2 rounds in the Robinson fight. Ben Askren, I think, will be able to handle his power quite easily in the first round or 2. And then he's got 6 more rounds. He hasn't fought that long. Boxing amateurs who come out of the amateurs, when they come in, when they're brought up, they fight 4 rounds, 6 rounds, 8 rounds, little by little step ups. This guy, this is not a professional fighter. He's getting an 8-round fight in his 3rd fight. Guys, this isn't Lomachenko. Even Lomachenko, the great, had to adjust from an amateur game. This is a YouTuber. I think we are underrating Ben Askren. I think we are overrating Jake Paul. And I think if you're going to bet this weekend, if I'm going to bet, again, this is not financial advice, guys. Please. 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 You're all grown people. You make your own bets. I'm just rambling. If you're going to make a pick this weekend on this fight, I can't really see why you don't take Ben Askren. He's not fighting a professional fighter. He's fighting a YouTuber. Yes, his stand-up sucks. It's relative. It's relative. Friends, please. Please. Okay, now, in the undercard of the same fight of the same card, we have Frank Mir versus Steve Cunningham. Now, I think Steve Cunningham is going to obviously beat Frank Mir, but there's not quite much money to be made here betting on Steve Cunningham, or he's a minus 1430. There's no way. You'd have to bet $1,430 to win 100. Yeah, that's not, no one's doing that. But the over-under is a little bit interesting. So now Steve Cunningham hasn't fought in a while. He's a smaller guy, and the over-under is 3.5. The under is a minus 125. The over is a minus 106. I think there's a chance, a pretty sizable chance, that Steve Cunningham, who hasn't fought in years, he won't be able to turn it on in the first 3.5 rounds. I think this goes long. Well, certainly longer than 3.5. Remember, guys, 3.5 means it must go into the 4th round, a minute and 30 seconds. Once it says a minute and 30 seconds, it's been over 3.5 rounds. So I actually like the over 3.5 at minus 106. That's almost even money odds you got going on. As I said, there's nothing else to say for the fight. Steve Cunningham fought at the world championship level. He was a legitimate, good cruiserweight, and he was an all-right heavy. He went up there. He actually knocked down Tyson Fury, who is, who was one of the 3 of the triumvirate era. So that's not nothing. I don't think Frank Mir has a chance. The question is Steve Cunningham rusty enough where Frank Mir lives the first 3 rounds, 3.5? If he does, which I think he will. Frank Mir's a big guy. He's a tough guy. He's fought against Brock Lesnar in the UFC. This heavyweights, the one interesting thing about MMA is that those 5-minute rounds, they're quite intense. With the wrestling, every single sport has its own relative difficulties when it comes to cardio and conditioning. And UFC, MMA and boxing do not have the same cardio demands, but they're at least relatively similar. This isn't a cyclist coming in here. You have to move on your feet and the such, but MMA has the longer rounds. They have some wrestling. This is both good and bad. It allows you to rest sometimes on the floor in a guard. It allows you to, at the same time, it forces you to, again, work for 5 minutes. Very difficult stuff, but I think he should have the stamina to make it through the 3 rounds. So again, I think I think we have a little bit of a money-making opportunity with Frank Mir and Steve Cunningham to go over 3.5 rounds. Again, it's supposed to go to 8, but we'll see. Another fight on the undercard is Prograis versus Redbach. Now, Redbach is rightfully the underdog here. And this is more to do with the fact that Prograis is very good. Very good. Yes, he lost to Taylor. But I think that's more indication of how good Taylor really is than any failings of Prograis. Prograis is a legitimate fighter, and Redbach is susceptible to getting stopped. Now, Redbach himself is a pretty decent fighter, but he got stopped against Dejan Zlachnachny and John Molina, which was actually a pretty big upset at the time, as I thought John Molina was done, and that was like 3-4 years ago. And here he goes, beats Redbach. Recently, he wound up losing to Danny Garcia in a UD, and he's a solid fighter, a solid southpaw, aggressive, but he gets hit a lot, guys. And against Prograis, I think that this kind of defensive liability, your inability to move laterally and just to try and swarm, is not going to work here. I think if you saw by the Taylor fight, Prograis needs to be outworked and hit at angles. Just standing in front of him the way I think Redbach is going to do is a recipe for disaster. I don't think this is going to work out well for him. Prograis has a lot of power, and he will absolutely, I feel, stop Redbach. Now, in terms of the odds, if you're trying to make a play here, they're wide. They're very wide. A minus 5,000 for Prograis to a plus 1,000 for Redbach. So the upset, should it occur, should pay you handsomely. That's 10-1, guys. That's 10-1. The over-under is again pretty decent as well, minus 115 at 5.5. So again, to the 6th round, 6.5. In the 6th rounds in 1 minute and 30 seconds is 5.5. So I think, again, I'm going to sit this one out probably. I think Redbach will lose. I don't know when he'll lose. So I don't see there to be any money for me to make it. I don't think, even if he lands on Prograis, I don't think he's going to stop him. I think he hits hard, but not that hard. He wasn't competitive with Danny Garcia, really. He kind of just got beat up there. He won like a few rounds, but he wasn't really very competitive, and Danny Garcia is not really... At 147, clearly Danny Garcia has reached the peak of his, I think, weight class, and he was better at 140 for sure than at 147. And Redbach wasn't really competitive here. He was kind of outclassed by Danny Garcia. And Danny Garcia is in the top 5, top 10 of welterweight. Well, top 5 of welterweight, let's say. Or just on that border, maybe slightly lower. It's only the top 10. And Redbach was clearly like a level below. And I just do not see him having a chance against Prograis, who I think is at the top echelon of 140. And him, again, losing to Josh Taylor says more about Taylor than it does about Prograis. So I believe this one is a sit-em-out fight. Again, you guys are the makers of your own destinies. So do what you guys want to do. But I'm sitting this fight out. Next, we have Demetrius Boo Boo Andrade versus Liam Williams. Guys, I don't bet on British fighters. I'm joking. I do, but as I always say, I'm not going to take him in these kind of fights. Liam Williams, he has 2 losses against Liam Smith. And outside of that, he hasn't beaten what I would call killers at 160. He doesn't quite have the depth, and Andrade quite doesn't have the names. This fight will give Williams some depth, but it won't really give Andrade a name. Unfortunately, Andrade just got stuck in a horrible position where nobody knows who he is outside of the hardcore, and therefore no chance to want to fight him. They just don't care. They don't have to. He's a good boxer. He's slick. He keeps a distance well. He's got enough pop to keep you honest. He's got a cool nickname. He's a decent looking guy, but nobody wants to fight him. Nobody has seen him fight. And unfortunately, they're kind of stinkers, his fights. That Suleski fight, it was boring. I watch his fights, but I'm a boxing fan. So I can watch him fight for 12 rounds, 10 rounds, however many it takes either to win a decision or get a guy out of there. But against for most fans, they don't care to see him against the champs. Like, yeah, he's been calling out Golovkin, and Golovkin's age, yeah, maybe he may beat him, but Golovkin's not going to fight him. There is no point to fight Andre. Unfortunately for Andre, he's going down the Lara route. Eventually, he'll get that name, but when he has already slowed. And that's what happened with Lara. He was too good to risk fighting against when he was really in his peak. And when he started to slow down and was forced to exchange and couldn't move as well, then all of a sudden now we can fight him. Now it's a good match. Now he's ready for the taking, and then you get to say you beat this superb boxer, so all the hardcore fans give you these accolades. But unfortunately, it does nothing for your career. And Boo Boo is in that same kind of boat, and I really feel for the guy. He's trying to do everything he can to get a fight. He's active on the social media. He's recently had the interview in the post fight. I think it was the Canelo post fight or the Golovkin post fight. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because nobody sees him. Everyone's like, who is this guy? Oh, he's like one of these boxers. Well, maybe when I see his knockouts, I'll want him to fight Golovkin or something. But the problem is he's not that fighter. And unfortunately, he's kind of stuck in network no zone. And just nobody wants to fight him. I do feel bad for the guy. And here is where Liam Williams has a shot. Andre could just get bored of fighting these second and third tier contenders and may just have a subpar training camp, may not take something seriously. And this is when Liam Williams goes and beats him. And British media don't stop talking about how he's really the best 160-pounder. No, I'm joking. But you know how they do that sometimes, and it's a little bit annoying. But if Boo Boo took this training seriously and took this fight seriously, I can't see Liam Williams having a shot. I think Andre just moves way too well. His distance, at distance, he's absolutely a monster. He's just a very top-level guy. And like I said, unfortunately, he just can't get the fights that he needs. And now, finally, let's talk about Tony Harrison. He's bad, guys. Tony Harrison is, for those of you who don't know, is known for taking Jermell Charlo's. He beat him in 2018 by a unanimous decision in a close but clear, I thought, victory. He then, of course, wound up losing by KO in the rematch. But this is hopefully a retooled and a sharper Tony Harrison that we see. Now, he was winning the first half of the fight in the rematch with Charlo. He just kind of lost it. Charlo is also very good, Jermell. Both Charlos are very good. And eventually, he just let in a few too many shots. You kind of have to fight the perfect fight against the Charlos as a boxer. If you remember Jamal Charlo wound up fighting Karabov and was basically losing the whole fight, but nearly stops him in the 12th round. Karabov didn't have anything left, and this is the kind of power the brothers have. They even if they're kind of losing large portions of fights, their power and their explosiveness is so real that you kind of have to be at 100% the entire time you fight them. And Tony Harrison really won the first half of that rematch pretty clearly. It's just he couldn't keep that boxing up, couldn't keep those. Boxing is a game of inches also. Actually, it's not even inches, it's centimeters and millimeters. And what doesn't hit you in round 1 may hit you in round 7 because you're just a little bit slower. And, Charlo, he's fast and explosive all fight long, as we saw in the rematch. So Tony Harrison, he's a good fighter, but he just couldn't quite keep it together for long enough in the rematch. Now, he's fighting Brian Perella this weekend, who is kind of like a third tier, fourth tier. He's outside the top 10, fourth tier contender. He wound up losing a majority decision to Luis Collazo, and recently was TKO by Abel Ramos. So this is a guy who's brought in here to kind of make Tony Harrison look good. It's time. It's you know. Then this isn't anything wrong with this. You know, everyone knows that this is what happens in boxing. You bring in these fighters. You have to rebuild your guy, especially a guy who was able to beat the champ. You don't wanna throw him right back in there, especially after a KO like that. You kind of want him to get the confidence back, you know, shake off some of that ring rust. It's been 2 years since he fought. COVID has, you know, some fighters stayed active, but majority of the fighters, they fought nothing. There was nothing going on for them. They kind of fell by the wayside. So Tony Harrison, you know, he needs a little bit of that retool and maybe consider a third fight with Jermell Charlo. So, and finally, another fighter I'm looking forward to see on the other card is the young kid VITO Mielnicki against James Martin. Now, VITO has been moving along steadily. We've seen him on the zone. We've seen him be brought up, and now he's kind of becoming an 8-round fighter. You know, he was a young kid. I think we wound up seeing his debut when he was 17 or so. So, young kid, very young, I guess, for the United States. I know and in some other countries, the kids sometimes will turn pro out of necessity at 15, 16. But here in the U.S., you know, 17-year-old pros, that's from this Northeast area. It's kind of rare to see, or at least not too common. Certainly not common to get him on the zone. And that's one of the things I think I told you guys about. What I liked about the earlier DAZN cards, they would really show you like those opening cards, those opening fights. And I love seeing these because I love seeing the 1 and 2 fighter fight against the 0 and 0 fighter, or the 2 guys that are 3 and 0 are going up against each other, or some young kid that just came out of the amateurs who's, you know, on his 3rd or 4th fight, finally fighting an 8-round fight or whatnot. And here with VITO, you're having him in an 8-round fight now. He looked pretty decent last time. I think he's with Goosen, right? And he looked pretty decent last time. You know, we have to see. He's going to develop a lot, obviously. Similar to Canelo, you're going to develop a lot, especially as you approach your physical peaks at around 22. So this kid is still young. He's getting faster and stronger and smarter. All these things are still happening. So, again, I'm going to keep a big eye out for him to see what we can see from him. Maybe we can kind of find out where that talent level is at. He's looking pretty good so far, but again, he needs slightly better opposition, which he's now getting, to see where we can imagine him to be. And that's going to do it for me, guys. So I hope you all make good choices if you're bettors this weekend. I wish you luck. I wish you success. And we're going to talk about the fights on Sunday or Monday. It's over.
I'm gonna go home and break my wife's hip.
Don't brag about taking my side piece. Don't brag about taking my side piece, though.
I broke my back. Back is broken. Spinal.
He's strong, man. Good boy. You know, just.